Hello, everybody. Welcome to our seminar today. Today we're going to talk about what it takes to be successful in 2015. This is Pat Sherlock. For those that are new to the webinar series, I'll be sharing my company's research and best practices from our clients in mortgage banking. My firm helps managers and companies resolve their sales problems from poor sales production to high turnover. And our approach is science-based, which really separates us from other companies. Today's topics is really critical topics about what the experts are saying about 2015, the bigger trend lines, and 3 key issues for managers. We'll talk about the personality traits of successful originators. We'll talk about the rise of the good manager, how important culture is. We'll talk about also best practices. We'll have a Q&A that will be done through the chat feature. Our previous podcasts or webinars are on our site, which is www.patsherlock.com. So please look at those podcasts for information regarding some of our past topics. When you look at 2015, we have a lot of good news, which is actually pretty exciting unto itself. When you see what experts are saying about job growth within the mortgage industry at the originator level, the good news is that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is projecting another 23,000 individuals will be hired as loan officers in this year. This is an 8% growth rate, which actually is normal in the industry, but obviously over the last few years, we've obviously not had those types of numbers. When you look at what the MBA is saying, they are predicting a 7% rise in originations. Again, their analysis and projection is we're in the purchase money market, and that's going to dominate versus refis. So all of the above is great news, but it certainly reinforces the need for a true sales culture in mortgage banks, credit unions, or banks. In the bigger picture, I like to talk about 3 trends that I think are important to the sales production side of mortgage banking. I discussed a lot of that in an article I wrote for the MBA just recently called The Future Sales Organization. If you'd like a copy of that article, please go to my website. The first issue in a more kind of broader picture is definitely what we are seeing is less is more. What I mean by that, I think you're going to see in 2015, sales reengineering is going to hit warp speed because currently too many companies are losing money on the origination side of the shop but only able to survive because of high servicing values. I think that improved sales productivity definitely will be on the front burner for most companies and managers. The units per loan offer is certainly a critical issue that needs to be measured. When you look at information, I think we're really in an age of wisdom. Information alone just isn't enough. So knowing your products or knowing your features really isn't going to do it. The Internet has certainly brought on tons of information. If you just Google the word mortgage, 550 million websites come up. Wow, think about that. 550 million websites come up for mortgage. But really, what's more important, and certainly what I see from a consulting standpoint, we still have just a small number of originators at any given mortgage firm doing most of the business. Why? The need for insightful, value-added conversations is really what is the role of the originator. So having lots of information is wonderful, but customers can access that pretty quickly. What they need to receive from the salesperson or the originator is a higher level of selling, a value added, insightful comment. It's very interesting also when you look about what people say about the Internet, that at one point that it would do away with salespeople, but actually what's happened is the very opposite. We have so much information that the importance of sales originators is more critical than ever. And finally, I think the trend that I see is good versus average. Too often in mortgage origination, managers and companies have been quite comfortable with average loan production per sales originator. And if you look back really over the last 10 years, our average production per loan officer is 2 units per month. It's very difficult, and certainly going forward through 2015, you're not going to make money at those levels. So as a result, mortgage managers really need to enforce higher performance standards, and obviously they have to implement them. If an originator is not good, they will really not survive. So this definitely is a time period of being good versus just being okay. When you take all these trends and you put them into what would be strategies that managers and companies can pursue, what I see going on in 2015 is really kind of 3 trend lines. The first is you really have to look at the sales people. Who you recruit and what you do with them after you recruited them is very critical. Your efficiency in onboarding them is very important. In fact, it's so important that next month's topic is going to be about onboarding and how to do it to ramp up originators as fast as possible. Many managers, when they hire, really are just looking at low-end producers, and these are individuals that produce somewhere between 8 to 12 million production a year. When they go to another company, the manager is thinking, well, our products, our pricing, our technology is going to make the difference, and now that originator is going to be a $20 million producer. Well, we know that's not true, and certainly research in this particular topic really reinforces over and over again that any salesperson, not just an originator, when they leave a company and they go to a second company, they are going to lose 50% of their referral sources. Wow. So people only with the right traits and the right skill sets are able to rebuild at the new lender. And certainly this can only occur if the individual has a learning agility. Those are the individuals that will be the survivors. And I'm going to talk about the trait side in a second. The second issue is sales control systems. What do I mean by that? Well, when you look at mortgage banking, a lot of belief, and certainly a lot of companies are set up, that they think that the right behaviors will occur just by how you structure a compensation plan. Too often what I see at companies, the first thing to get changed is the compensation plan. Well, that certainly is conventional wisdom, and the idea is that if you reemphasize through money what the originator is supposed to do, that this will be basically a successful strategy. You don't actually have to manage them. Well, this conventional wisdom is truly not correct. This idea that if you leave the originator alone, that they're going to be productive and happy. Again, not true, and certainly not the experience that I see in assisting mortgage companies to improve. The truth is that our current level of production market, which is obviously purchase money, if you want to have an excellent customer experience, it has to be excellence throughout the sales organization. A company and a manager's priorities really come into play. What do the processes look like? How professional are your salespeople? Again, those things don't just happen. They really are driven by the quality of the sales culture and the quality of the manager, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And when you really get down to what the research says, top producers really are not motivated by money. And what you end up seeing, they are motivated by achievement. Money's only a measurement of it. And they also are motivated by developing expertise, which I think does not get emphasized at enough companies. The third issue that I see being the trend line for 2015 is the company's environment. It's more critical than ever. Why should originators join you, and why should they stay? It's a basic question that I often ask managers that we're involved with, and certainly you should be able to answer that question. Again, this is all driven by having good managers, managers that do the hiring well, the selection, and the setting expectation for their originators. A company can really have the greatest products, strategies, and pricing, but if they don't have the right people, it's very hard to be successful, not only on the short term, but on the long term. So your culture component is really all about really putting together the right mission, the right values, and obviously the right people. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second. Let's talk about salespeople, the first issue that I'm suggesting in 2015 you really have to take a close look at. What you see on this slide are two components. One is relationship, the other is drive. And what they represent are 15 years of research in predicting what personality traits translate into being an above-average originator. The relationship side starts with social all the way down to being optimistic. I think in the interview process, companies and managers are usually pretty good in seeing if the person has a relationship skill set. The part that's the problem, typically in the interview process, is the drive side of it. Mortgage banking is all about being self-reliant, having a high energy, a focus, and resilient side. Those are traits that are early on formed, and really, from a practical standpoint, is what the interview should be about. Does this individual have those personality traits? That's certainly where assessments help you in making that determination. Being mystified by the fact that the person came from one of the named companies, your Wells, your Cities, or your Chase, doesn't mean that that individual can sell. If you'd like to learn more about the trait side of it, certainly check out some of the previous podcasts where I discussed it more in depth. The second part that I think is the trend line for 2015 is sales control. I've already talked about that money is important, but you can't substitute money for good management. Mortgage banking, again, from a control mechanism of wanting to have the right behaviors, has always looked at it from the standpoint that the individual originator can earn what they achieve. That's all great, and in practical terms, certainly has worked well for the originator during a refi market. Not so much when you move to purchase money and the real talent set comes to play. And when you have a structure of producing managers, what has occurred that the control is really hard to achieve when the individual themselves is originating their own pipeline. None of the oversight, the monitoring, and the intervention about selling tactics does occur. I think, as I see certainly with many companies, a lot more discussion on this topic. Again, what we're going to in a purchase money market is requiring manager intervention, and that can only occur if the manager essentially has the time. In this whole complex market of purchase money, good managers are going to be needed more than ever to develop their originators. Unless you just want it to be a tagline, you have to recognize that not everybody can be a good manager, just like not everybody can be a good originator. So the third part, which I'd like to really spend a lot more time, and what's reflected in this slide, the culture component. In 2015, having a sales culture is critical. As the slide represents, there's two strategies in place. One says, what would you rather have? A great originator and an average manager? Or would you rather have a great manager and an average originator? Unfortunately, too many people in mortgage banking will opt for the first strategy, where great originators have managers that are really just average or below average. The problem with that strategy is that, unfortunately, people leave average managers. Yes, let me repeat that. If you're not a good manager, they are not staying. And that's for sure when they're a top producer, because those individuals have many options. And frankly, in all origination, originators have options now due to the fact that certainly through the rechanging of the industry, they're in great demand. So great originators and an average manager is really a strategy that is destined not to play out well. And what happens to complicate the whole issue is that average managers, or what I would call C managers, unfortunately, they hire C originators. And so what does that mean? Well, that means why we have 2 units per loan officer on average in our industry. So let's look at B. This is a great manager and average LOs. Well, a great manager not only attracts great people, but the truth of the matter is they are also the same individuals that hire top players. And by top, I mean people want to work for a good manager. People don't want to work for someone that doesn't give them feedback, doesn't develop their skills, doesn't move them to the next level. I mean, that's just the fact of business life. So the combination of what strategy do you have in your company, again, too often what I see is scenario A, which is great LOs, but not very good managing, and not enough of great managers, which are certainly what I am suggesting, that has to be a focus in 2015. If you need help in selecting the managers or looking at the competency side of it, certainly let me know. I'd be glad to share with you what we see and what works. So to summarize the best practices, the 5 action steps that I'm suggesting that you put in place for 2015, the first is, again, I cannot repeat enough, selecting well your sales managers, your most critical issue as a manager. Sales managers really do drive your originators from a development standpoint, and having a quality person means that you really have to do more of an analytic on can that person coach and develop individuals. That's where pre-hires can help you with that. The second part, you have to evaluate your current managers that you have on board now. What is their managing skill sets? What needs to be improved? Too often what I see that the managers that have been in our industry for a very long time really don't know how to hire. The coaching side of it is definitely an issue, and the development and how they give feedback and creating a positive environment, just they're not even aware of it, mainly because these are individuals that are producers in mindset and not manager in mindset. The third step, when you move originators into sales managers, again, these individuals need to receive training on these topics that I've already mentioned. What we saw when looking at top managers in mortgage banking, there really are 5 practices that you have to have, and they are hiring, expectation setting, leveraging your time. As a manager, you're doing a lot of things, and so how do you get the most out of your time? Giving positive reinforcement and showing your originators a sales success model that matches to their strength. There are 5 topics that you as a manager are doing every day, and our excellent managers in mortgage banking are experts in those 5 practices. The fourth strategy, when a manager is having difficulty or a manager might be a long time in the industry, we often think, well, it might get better. Well, the truth of the matter is the school of hard knocks left unaddressed is really a ticket for a failure. What I would suggest is that your managers that are having difficulty with these issues that I have received the training might need personal coaching themselves. So it's worth the weight and goal to pursue that angle. So again, managing just for a long time does not mean that you have the current skill sets to be effective today. And finally, the 5th practice is origination is basically a human performance business. This is what it's all about. And the behaviors that we are executing are a reflection of who we hire, how we set the expectations for them, and then how we coach them. So to keep a tune on those issues, I'd say that certainly part of your practices means that you should do a 360 on an annual basis. The 5 practices that I've already mentioned, there's a great book called Aligning Strategies and Sales, and it talks about each one of those issues. It's been published by the Harvard Business Press, and it's really a great book on talking about the current situation in the world of sales management. Today's takeaway that I want to emphasize that I see 2015 is the year of the good manager who develops their originators to move to the next level. We need to be serious about this topic, and we need to actually invest in these individuals, because managing is what really sets performance achievement. So let's open it up for any questions. Please go through the chat feature, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have. I have one question here from Tom, and Tom is asking the question that I certainly get asked a lot, and that is selling a learned behavior or a born skill? Great question that's always on people's mind. I will have to tell you that it is a learned skill. There's no DNA for who would be an effective originator, likewise, or an effective manager. But the truth of the matter is the people have certain set of behaviors that are fairly well established early on, and therefore they match to this position of selling or managing. So it is a learned position. Therefore, anyone basically has that opportunity. But just like in any sports, whether it's football, tennis, or golf, these are traits that you have to essentially really reinforce and develop early on in life. So while it's learned, you have to basically reinvest your time into it, and it starts out pretty early. Another question from Noelle. What is an indication, a quick indication, regarding managing quality? Great question, Noelle. I'm going to share with you what I do, one of my trick of the trades when I'm involved with a consulting project or in the training side of it. I ask this simple question: who does the manager spend their time with? Again, let me just reinforce the question again. Who does the manager spend their time with? Invariably, when you ask this question, what you find pretty quickly is that your good managers will spend their time with what I would call A players, or your top performers. Why? Because they understand the leveraging component of greater performance comes from your individuals that are already achieved versus trying to take what I would call a C player and making them a B player, or someone that would be an acceptable performance level. So just this one question translates into really, and says much about the manager. So I would suggest when you ask this question, you will be surprised at the different answers that the individuals give. And unfortunately, what I see, the answer is that they spend all their time with the C players, those that are underperformers. Not the right answer, and not what your great managers do in mortgage banking. Your great managers recognize that the C players should be addressed quickly, and that the A players are who they're going to take to the next level. Both questions are great, and both questions certainly hit home on an issue that, is a quick way for you to determine the quality of the manager. And even when you're an originator and you are interviewing at a company, that's a great question to ask the manager, because it tells you a lot about what attention you're going to receive, especially if you are a higher performer. Great questions. For those that have any other questions, certainly email me or text me. I'd be glad to answer them. For 2015, just a quick note. Certainly, if you're looking for a speaker on any of these types of topics, let me know. I'd be glad to talk to you about them, and certainly welcome hearing from you. Just a couple things, certainly from a resource standpoint. I also have a sales blog. Certainly sign up. Love to hear from you. I also am on LinkedIn and certainly would love to connect with you. Articles and podcasts, as already mentioned, are on the patsherlock.com site. We do have other things that you might be interested in along the lines of ebooks and sales videos, so certainly look at them.